Finally, the painting day has arrived. The decision was made to paint the top half first and the bottom half last. Because the painting coat is applied in 2 coats, Rick and Deb have arrived very early to prepare the surface. This provided the students with much more time to paint. The first day's work was traced onto thin tracing paper. The tracing paper is then perforated by using a wheel with pointed cogs.
Fingers of an artist.
This perforated tracing is then placed over the wet plaster. A small muslin sack containing black pigment is pounced over the perforated lines, transferring the image onto the wet plaster. Students painted in shifts, 5 at a time, for 30 minutes each. In fact, that was how the entire work schedule was organized. Each of the 5 work days was divided into 13 different 30-minute work sessions from 8:30 in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Students from each grade level, 6th, 7th, and 8th, came down to the Café to take their turn working on the fresco. Over 325 ROM students worked on creating this one-of-a-kind work of art. Pigment is painted on in thin layers, allowing the crystal to lock in the color of each layer. Color is built up slowly and gradually, coat after coat. White is the white of the plaster surface. A difficult thing to remember is that there is no erasing. Every brush stroke, or sometimes every drip, is recorded forever. That's why you see the students working so seriously and concentrating on each stroke. Frescanti, Italian for fresco makers, it is said, make no mistakes, because whatever happens is dealt with and used in the mural, and then they just move on. The first example of fresco is believed to be cave paintings found in La Salle, France, 30,000 years ago. The ancient Greeks and Romans used fresco to alleviate claustrophobia in windowless rooms. During the Renaissance, Michelangelo used fresco to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, and Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper is also a fresco. Closer to home, Diego Rivera used fresco to create the Detroit Industries frescoes downtown at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Rick and Deb have arrived early again for the final day of painting. One day's work on a fresco is called giornata. Extra care has to be taken dealing with the seam between the first giornata and the next. Other than that, the process is identical to day 1. Tracing, plastering, perforating, pouncing, and painting. Here we see black pigment being pounced over the perforated lines, transferring the image to the wet plaster. Essentially, the first painters will have to play connect the dots until the drawing is fully outlined. As with the top half, pigment is painted on in thin layers, allowing the crystals to lock in each color on each layer. Another thing to be aware of is the plaster dries, the color will lighten as much as 20%, which means the color the students are painting now needs to be darker than what it will look like in 30 days. The magic of fresco is that light doesn't just reflect off the surface as it does in other forms of painting. Because the colors are transparent, light passes through the color, and when it hits the white of the plaster behind, it bounces back through the color again. This quality of luminosity gives the fresco its brilliant matte finish. This is also why, no matter what angle you look at the mural from, there will never be any glare. This mural represents a long tradition of using the technique of fresco in public works of art. The students at Royal Oak Middle School have created a piece of history that will stand the test of time. As long as this building exists, these students can return to Royal Oak Middle School and point to the mural and proudly say, "I did that." And who knows, maybe someday they will return with their own children and tell them the story of how they were part of creating Royal Oak history.